today's 82nd commemoration of the Iași Pogrom that took place in Iași, Romania in June 1941. Today I will serve as your program director, as the MC, and we have a very interesting and reflective program for today's event. First of all, I want to unpack a little bit the word pogrom, because it's a Russian word meaning to wreak havoc, to demolish violently, and historically it was a term that started in Russia, actually, to refer to violent attacks by local non-Jewish populations against Jewish population. And it started in the Russian Empire during the Tsarist time, but sadly did not end there. And actually only last week, on the 9th and 10th of November, we remembered the 85th anniversary of the November pogrom, that many of us know as Kristallnacht. That was the Nazi term of that pogrom, and that happened, of course, during the Second World War. During the Second World War, and especially after the German invasion to the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941, the Nazis actually encouraged pogroms. It's hard to believe, but they encouraged the local populations to launch pogroms. And those happened in many, many places. Some are more known, some are not so known. Of course, Iași pogrom is known because of its size and impact on the local population. And pogroms also happened after the war, such as the ones in Kielce and in Krakow in Poland, after the Second World War was over. These horrific pogroms stayed in Jewish collective memory, and actually it stayed in the Jewish psyche, I would say, and those horrors and fear and trauma are still with us as a Jewish community today, as can be seen actually in the last weeks. On the 29th of June 1941, as Nazi Germany and its Axis partner Romania invaded the Soviet Union, Romanian officials and military units, assisted at times by German soldiers, launched a pogrom in Iași. We are humbled to have in Johannesburg one of the last witnesses and one of the last survivors of the Iași pogrom, Mr. Lyonell Fliss, who will share his testimony with us today. But to start this afternoon's program, I would like to invite the Ambassador of Romania to South Africa, Her Excellency Mrs. Monica Sitaru, to address us. Ms. Ambassador.
Good day to everyone present. Mr. Lyonell Fliss, Ms. Tali Nates, Director of Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, German Deputy Head of Mission, Mr. Enrico Brandt, Reverend Răzvan Tatu, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming and thank you very much for inviting me. It gives me a great privilege and honor to be here today to commemorate the Iași Pogrom in June 1941. I am here today to pay tribute to the victims and survivors of the Iași Pogrom, one of survivors being Mr. Lyonell Fliss, whom I salute warmly. I must confess that since I have met Mr. Fliss, I have been deeply impressed by his touching but very real life history. As I promised you, Mr. Fliss, a few months ago, here I am. Romania has assumed its past concerning the Holocaust, and in the last 20 years has significantly invested in Holocaust education, research, and remembrance. As President of Romania, His Excellency, Mr. Klaus Iohannis said on the occasion of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it is our permanent duty for all of us to take a firm stance and to admit the mistakes of the past, as well as to honor the memory of those who have innocently perished. Intolerance, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and hatred were behind the massacre in June 1941, in which men, women, elders, and children died. In the light of the values Romania shares today, and in order to never forget, our generation bears a double mission. Firstly, to honor the memory of the victims of the pogrom in Iași, and secondly, to actively engage in the fight against any extremist behaviors and to promote freedom and tolerance. The opening on June 30, 2021 of the Memorial Museum of the Victims of the Iași Pogrom being one of the darkest moments in Romanian history, and of the memorial space in the courtyard of the former police headquarters in Iași, where hundreds of members of the local Jewish local community have been murdered, are living proof of Romania's long-standing commitment to Holocaust remembrance. At the beginning of 2021, the Romanian government has designated a special representative for the combating of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and memorial policies. In May 2021, the government of Romania has adopted our first national strategy for preventing and combating anti-Semitism, xenophobia, radicalization, and hate speech, and its action plan. A coordinator was appointed, tasked with monitoring the implementation of the strategy. Our first national strategy and its action plan continue to be implemented, and their implementation is monitored in the committee set up in the Prime Minister's office. By a law 2076 adopted in November of 2021, the subject history of the Jewish, the Holocaust, has become a compulsory subject in high schools studies, part of the main curricula in high schools. The subject history of the Jewish, the Holocaust is now part of the mandatory curricula in high schools, and the formal launch event was organized by the Prime Minister's office on the 3rd of October this year. According to the provisions of the law, the subject Jewish history, the Holocaust, has become part of the core curriculum. Starting with the 2023-2024 school year, the subject is taught in the 11th or 12th grades at all forms, pathways of upper secondary education, theoretical, vocational, technological, professional, as well as in special education. We are also continuing our work on opening the National Museum of Jewish History and Holocaust in Romania through the Elie Wiesel Institute for the Study of Holocaust, another long-standing objective on our path to the Holocaust remembrance. By taking such measures, Romania became a regional model in terms of assuming the Holocaust and countering Holocaust denial and distortion. Our commitment to encouraging the research, education, and commemoration of the Holocaust has and will continue to be steadfast. All these are proofs that Romania does not deny its past associated with the Holocaust, but assumes it and continually searches for solutions to honor the memory of the victims and remember the past. We believe that active involvement of each of us in denouncing and combating any form of extremism, intolerance, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia is to grade a critical responsibility that concerns the entire society. I assure you of Romania's continuous commitment to combating anti-Semitism, countering Holocaust denial, trivialization, distortion, promoting Holocaust remembrance, commemoration, and research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sitaru, and your words are very, very important. And speaking about Elie Wiesel, of course, a son of Romania, and remembering him and remember his contribution not only to Holocaust memory, but to learning lessons from the Holocaust is indeed very important. I would like now to invite Deputy Ambassador of Germany in South Africa, Mr. Enrico Brandt, to address us.
Dear Excellency, Ambassador Sitaru, dear Ms. Nates, dear Mr. Sachs, and dear Mr. Fliss, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe we can improve it a little bit. See, I'm so sorry. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. And I am, first of all, extremely grateful, dear Mr. Fliss, that you are here today as one of the last living witnesses of the Iasi Pogrom. It cannot be appreciated enough that you have the strength to speak about the horror of those days. We are all the more grateful to you that you do this, not only today, but also again and again in front of young people. The death procession of Iasi is considered the largest pogrom against the Jewish population in Romania. It didn't come unannounced. In the months and years before that, Jews were confronted with exclusion and discrimination. The pogrom took place in June 41 not only under the observation of German military officers, but with the participation of German Nazis, and it reached its unimaginable barbaric climax on that Sunday on June 29th. We bow with sadness and shame to the dead and victims of this massacre. Ladies and gentlemen, anti-Semitism led to the extermination of a fifth of the Jews of Iasi. Across Europe, as we all know, over 6 million Jews died as a result of National Socialism that originated in Germany. Many more millions of Jews fled and found their new homes far outside Europe, some of them here in South Africa, and many Jews settled in Israel. We in Germany will never forget what happened in that time in the name of Germany. Never again has become a cornerstone in the political thinking of the great majority of Germans. Never again holds true, especially now, as had been alluded before. This is why Germany very quickly and unequivocally condemned the barbaric acts perpetrated by Hamas terrorists against Jews on October 7th. Some of you might have seen disturbing scenes of people in Germany marching through the streets and celebrating the acts of Hamas. Well, the associations that are responsible for that have been banned, and the slogan "From the river to the sea" has been made illegal because it denies the right of existence of Israel. And I believe that this quick reaction in Germany would not have been imaginable without us being conscious of the historic injustice that had been done by anti-Semitism. The fact that we do not forget is particularly thanks to the many contemporary witnesses who, like you, to the best of their ability, still report on what happened at the time. But it also is the merit of museums and memorial institutions, that we are continually reminded of the past and do not forget. I'm highly grateful to Tali Nates and her team, who are committed to remembering the horrors of the Holocaust and genocide and offering an impressive educational and political program at their center. You really do a great and valuable job. I'm sure that, unfortunately, these institutions will continue to be needed in the future. We can learn from history that anti-Semitism keeps coming back. And the only efficient way to fight it is to do exactly the educational job that you're doing. And we will continue to support you. I would like to end with a quote from our former German President Horst Köhler. He's always a good source for quotes for me, because I used to work in his office when he was in charge. And his family comes from the former Romanian Bessarabia, just a few kilometers away from Iași. He said, "Awareness of the past and corresponding vigilance today is a prerequisite for change. True commitment comes when someone takes something to heart and takes action. This applies to work in schools and in communities, to concrete actions and to symbolic gestures. Empty, meaningless statements don't get us anywhere. And may today's commemoration not remain a meaningless statement, but rather give us the strength to change and improve." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Ambassador, and your words about education and the importance of education are sadly more true than ever. And in this institution, tens of thousands are coming. Online and in person, we are standing at an amazing number of people that crossed these doors of this institution, of over 150,000 for this year alone. So, but there is more work to be done. There is no doubt about it. To deliver a message from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, I would like to invite Mr. David Sachs, also a historian and a writer, to address us.
Thank you, Tali. If you don't mind, I'm going to read from the computer here. Just brought my glasses. My work at the SA Jewish Board of Deputies includes editing and the journal Jewish Affairs, which has been produced under the auspices of the board since 1941. In that capacity, I've had the opportunity of meeting and working with a great many interesting and remarkable people, and helping to bring to wider attention their extraordinary stories that they have to tell. And one of those people is today's distinguished keynote speaker, Lyonell Fliss. It's a great, I think it's a great privilege for me personally, knowing Lyonell and having worked with him to be able to say a few words today. And it's quite sobering to think that Jewish Affairs, I said it came out in 1941, it probably came out virtually at the same time. The very first issue of Jewish Affairs, when that Sunday occurred, the infamous Iasi Pogrom. As a child, only 6 years old, Lyonell was witness to, and only by the barest chance was able to survive that massacre, in which over 13,000 Romanian Jews died, largely at the hands of their fellow citizens, almost entirely in fact. We did have the opportunity of publishing Lyonell's testimony in Jewish Affairs, and included in that account was how on the 29th of June 2022, the 81st anniversary of the pogrom, he was presented the title of honorary citizen of the city of Iași in a prestigious ceremony at the Iași Opera House, which I think is part of this ongoing story of acknowledgement and healing, I think, which is also part of Holocaust memory. The first Jewish Affairs project that Lyonell and I worked on, however, wasn't about the Iasi Pogrom, but which he experienced firsthand and which he and his parents survived only by the barest chance. Rather, it was about Lyonell's determination to defend the Jewish people against a new kind of war that is being waged against them. And to explain what that war is, I will quote the following from the introduction to his article, which appeared in the Pesach 2019 issue of Jewish Affairs. Lyonell wrote that if the Holocaust was aimed at the physical annihilation of the European Jews, the present war, which I call the Heritage War, is targeting the historic heritage of the Jewish nation to prove, so-called, that, quote marks, that this nation did not ever have any deep roots in history, and particularly in their own land of Israel. Physical massacre is being replaced by an intellectual one. After escaping from communist-ruled Romania, Lyonell moved to Israel and lived there for a number of years. He worked as an engineer, and he was involved in the building of what has become a symbol of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which is the water tower on Mount Scopus. But his abiding vision, however, has long been to see the establishment, also on Mount Scopus, of a Jerusalem Heritage Forum, with an integrated panoramic observatory, a tower, Jerusalem Tower. And from this tower, people will be able to learn, discuss, and see at a glance 3,000 years plus of Jewish history and of the Jewish people's connection with Jerusalem, the heart of their land and the surrounding areas. It is a vision that is yet to be realized, but which may indeed become a reality one day. Institutions like the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre likewise recognize the critical importance of memory, of recording, teaching, and raising awareness about the events of World War II. One danger, obviously, is that with the passage of time, such events will gradually come to be forgotten. But however, from a Jewish perspective, there's another even more pressing need to document and maintain awareness about our history, particularly with regard to the Holocaust. And that is the phenomenon of Holocaust denialism. In 2017, the SAJBD brought Dr. Gregory Stanton out to South Africa from the United States to present expert witness testimony in a very important hate speech case that we were involved in at the time. And Dr. Stanton's expertise is in genocide studies. And during his presentation to the court, he explained the various stages that genocide almost invariably goes through, from the words of demonization to the exclusion to getting gradually worse until actually it culminates in actual physical extermination. But there's an additional phase, additional step in genocide, and that is denialism. Both at the time and thereafter, the perpetrators of genocide everywhere typically try to cover up what they had done, to deny it. We're all too well aware of how Nazi apologists and anti-Semites of all stripes had engaged in Holocaust denial and version from the time that World War II ended. And we continue to see how over a century later, Turkey persists in denying the Armenian genocide carried out at the behest of the then Ottoman Empire. It's almost a political crime to call them out for it, even to this day. Similarly, in Romania, during the years of communist rule, the reality of how hundreds of thousands of Romanian Jews were murdered, in the main by their fellow Romanians, was a well-kept secret. It was a collective guilty secret, something that was never confronted or even spoken about. But only with the fall of communism, the restoration of freedom and independence to Romania in the early 90s, did this at last begin to change. And particularly in recent years, we've witnessed encouraging progress by the Romanian state in moving away from the official denial and cover-ups of previous administrations towards acknowledging the country's complicity in the Holocaust and in reaching out to those survivors who remain with us. Lyonell Fliss is one of the very last survivors of the Iasi Pogrom, which he and his fellow survivors would always refer to between themselves simply as that Sunday. It's interesting that even the survivors felt constrained about talking about it openly. The enormity of what had happened and the manner in which the people of the town went about their everyday business afterwards as if it had never happened was the reality most of these survivors would live with for the remainder of their lives. But now at last, that truth is being acknowledged, and not just by the governments of Romania, but by the people of Romania as a whole. And we hope to see that this process continue, allowing this and future generations to confront and thereby find meaning and hopefully healing in this part of their country's history. And through this, commit to fostering a society where such evils will never be allowed to happen again. And where never again is not just a slogan, but a lived reality. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, David, for your words and for your research and assistance in writing Lyonell's story. It is now a great pleasure to invite our keynote speaker, a Holocaust survivor, Iasi Pogrom survivor, Mr. Lyonell Fliss, to deliver his keynote testimony with us. You heard a little bit about his CV, very impressive CV. May I just add that Lyonell is known to us as a Holocaust survivor, but actually he's a very, very well-respected civil engineer with huge career in Romania, in Israel, in South Africa, teaches also at Wits, does so much of speaking, honorary citizen now of Iași. So there is so much to say about you, Lyonell. But for us, you are part of our team of survivors here at the center, sharing your testimony with many, many groups. Thank you, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Tali, for your kind introduction. I almost didn't recognize myself. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor, not for me, but for those who perished in that tragedy, in that Sunday in Iași, to be remembered and to listen, to learn a lesson from what happened 82 years ago, in that Sunday, like this Sunday, a Sunday, but totally different. About the Holocaust, there were written many books, thousands of stories, movies, plays, television series. So what one more testimony can add to this display of literature and history? Well, it may add, because my testimony will be a description of what happened in the past, but from a different angle, maybe unique angle. The view and the thoughts through the eyes and the mind of a 6-year-old boy. And you'll see that it was very different from what the reality was, because his innocent mind and his small world in which he lived didn't leave room for the atrocities that he was a witness to. And all these memories were imprinted in his mind very deep. I can explain why. Because at that age, the mind was like a blank sheet, and the memories were left very well imprinted and very clear in his memory for the rest of his life. When I came in South Africa about 50 years ago, I noticed that Romania was very little known that exists on this planet. Sometimes at the post office, when I was sending a letter, I was asked if it's not in South America. So I'll take the advantage now to remind you what is Romania in a few words and where it is. Here is the hard map of Europe. Romania is in the southeastern part of Europe, close to the Dead Sea, surrounded by a number of countries, Ukraine, Hungary, Serbia, Bulgaria. And it's a country of, in terms of European sizes, of mid-size, not very small. It's about a fifth in area of South Africa, about 250 square kilometers. Romania was created by uniting three historic principalities: Moldova or Moldavia, Muntenia in the south, and Transylvania to the northwest. I was born in Iași, which was the historic capital of Moldova, as it's pronounced in Romania. And this, I would like to give you an idea what that town, Iași, was and it is still. It was called the town in the heart, orașul din inimă, because it was a very friendly place, a very loved place, and the cradle of the Romanian culture. But we'll see what can happen in this heart. What tragedy. Was the capital of Moldova, of that province, since the times of the greatest king, Stephen the Great, about 600 years ago, was declared capital of this place. And it has a lot to show to prove that it was the cradle of the Romanian culture. The most prominent place, palace, is called the Palace of Culture, and you can see it here. Architectural jewel of the town, which now it's a museum and is still called the Palace of the Culture. Iași, it's also famous for its National Theatre, an extraordinary work of architecture built in the 19th century in Iași. And with this building, my talk has a close relationship that you'll see. It can accommodate a full house of about 1,000 people. And look at the internal and external architecture. Iași has extraordinary gardens, public gardens. The most famous of them is Copău Park in Iași. And this is one of the monuments with many statues. This was erected for the heroes of the First World War who defended Romania. In that garden, there is a historic tree on the top, and it's historic because under his shade, the most famous poet, the national poet, Mihail Eminescu, was writing his poems. Big cathedrals, just a sample. This is the Metropolitan Cathedral. And a more modest synagogue with a great name, great synagogue, but it's only great in comparison with other small synagogues. Nothing to do with the major churches in the town. And as I said, Iași was and it is a university town. Culture, what do you want more than this? The university, the main university. And this was a society called Junimea, means the youth of illuminated people. But the main star of Iași was the national poet, Mihail Eminescu, who changed even the language. And he is adulated by everybody there. Well, this is Iași. And then it was a big question that I asked Her Excellency, the Ambassador, how it was possible that such an atrocity happened with this kind of environment, people. Maybe at the end we'll try to find an answer. I was born in Iași from a family of middle-class family, merchants, lawyers, engineers like me, even winemakers, because Iași is in the area of famous noble wines, wineries, Kotna, and that may say something to my Romanian fellows. Life was a quiet life in Iași, quite provincial, because Iași didn't become the capital of Romania. Bucharest was, just to draw attention to those who confound Bucharest with Budapest. Many are doing this. Anyway, my early memories in my childhood was playing in the streets. There were no cars those times. Going with the family on holiday, on weekends and holidays to the vineyards of my family in Iași. And the best time that I had was a toy shop across the road from our house, where my favorite toys were tin soldiers. They had plenty, and they were so attractive, and I was playing with them at home. These are family memories. In the summers, the whole family was going to resorts, health resorts, spa, because that part of Romania had famous mineral water spas in Bucovina, and not far from Iași. Spending there a month and so. And you can see part of my family, and you can notice that there were only women there, because the men were bringing them to the spa and coming back to Iași because couldn't afford to spend the time there. And only woman, maybe you may recognize me looking there and here. I was the only man. Vatra Dornei. One of the first pictures. Life went like this, but the mid-30s and the beginning of the 40s were turbulent times in Europe. War in the Western Europe started already by almost 2 years. France, and anti-Semitism was rife. Actually, again, you ask, in a town of culture, of civilized world, how could be possible such a plague? Anyway, in that Sunday that I mentioned, the 29th of June, 41, we were sleeping in our flat. It was early in the morning, and all of a sudden they were screaming, shooting in the street, people wailing. It was myself and my parents that we woke up, and all of a sudden, and I came from my bedroom to my parents to be together with them, my mother realized something, and she screamed, "There is a pogrom!" Now, I didn't understand what she says, because this word wasn't part of my vocabulary at that age, as a little boy. But I understood from her screaming, that it's not something good. And immediately she took command of us. Let's hide under the bed. So we follow her command. My father, myself, her. Under the bed, she gave us some instructions. Don't move, don't cough, don't sneeze, and don't walk, don't speak. And for me, at that stage. Wasn't difficult, because I consider this is a kind of a children's game. Because I was always playing with my friends hide and seek. And I saw this something similar. Never mind. Not long after this, big blows in the entrance door in the flat, and a voice shouting, swearing from outside to open the door. We didn't move. It was Enake. Enake is a popular peasant name in Romania. He was the caretaker of the block of flats. When he started banging in the door and forcing the door, the door was too strong, he came back with an axe and broke the door open. Not seeing us inside, starting swearing again, and it wouldn't be difficult to guess what he would have done to us with his axe. But he helped himself, looting the flat, making a bundle with the cover of the bed that we were underneath, and left with his looting. We didn't get up because we were still scared that he may come back. But after a while, we heard some noise in the staircase as the door was broken and open wide, of boots climbing the stairs, and some words that I couldn't understand what they were. It was the German army helping those who committed this massacre to do their terrible deed. But the Germans, when they entered in the flat, they weren't menial thieves like Enake. They were professionals. They were trained in searching. The first thing they did, they turned the bed upside down with us on the floor. I still can't believe they didn't shoot us on the floor directly. But they ordered us to get up out of the flat to the staircase. Now, in all this panic, my mother lost the view of me. And when she reached the stairs, she turned to see where I am. And now she was facing the German soldier, face to face. What do you think he did? He pushed her over the stairs. She tumbled a full flight of stairs until stopped against the wall. We, my father and I, instinctively ran to help her. Again, I can't explain why they didn't shoot us, pretending that we tried to run away. But they didn't. We found her wailing, full of blood, not moving. Eventually we managed to lift her, and we were ordered by the same soldier, German soldier, to get out of the building in the street, hands up. We did it. She hardly could walk because she injured herself, and after all this, doctors found out that she broke her kneecap, suffered from this for the rest of her life. In the street, we were we were herded towards a place that the German soldier had the order to bring us there. And this was the central police station in Romania, Chestura, means a place of questioning. In that day, actually the entire Jewish population was ordered to present to the Chestura for searching, but the actual intention was to be massacred. And we were working. It was quite a long walk. Well, at a certain moment, my arms were hurting me, so I left them down. The German behind started to scream to me. I didn't understand what, because he was doing in German. My mother translated to me, lift your arms, otherwise he will shoot you. Again, mentality of a little boy. I thought that he is a reasonable person. By the way, when the Germans came to Iași, I, as a little boy, I admired them because they looked so good in their uniforms, shining armament, driving motorcars, army motorcars that we never saw before. For me, they looked like my tin soldiers impersonated. You can see the difference in perception from a little boy to an adult person, mature person. Anyway, I still considered him a human being, not a beast, because I couldn't believe that he is a beast. He was still part of those who I admired the day before. And I spoke to him in Romanian, telling that my arms are hurting and I can't keep them up. You know what was his response? When he saw that I'm not obeying what he says, but also talking back, he cocked his rifle to be ready to shoot. My parents, when they saw this, they immediately, they frozen. They took my arms, each one, with the other arm of theirs up, and we walked in this formation with the beast at the back, who accepted this compromise. Well, we arrived to the street of the police station, and he passed us to his brothers in arms, the Romanian soldiers, to take us for the next phase, the final one. The street was full of hundreds of people from one side to another. It was a queue that occupied the whole street, and very disorganized. In the end, we reached at the other end of the street, the police station building and courtyard. In front of the courtyard was a number of soldiers that were keeping so-called of order and introducing people in the courtyard in groups. When the gate was opening, we could see what happens in that courtyard. There were piles of bodies. People who were murdered, they were put in piles. Even it was one that stays in my memory, who was sitting on the floor, lying back to one of these piles and begging, full of blood, begging to be killed because can't support the pain. When my mother saw what is going on the other side of the gate, looked around, and next to us was a young Romanian officer, so-called keeping order. She kneeled in front of him. She took his hand and kissed it, and implored him, "Officer, take me and my husband through the gate. This was the gate of death. But keep this little boy and adopt him, and he will love you for the rest of your life." The officer listened to her and said, "Madam, please let me help you to get up, and I'll try to help you." And guess what? He kept his word, because doing such an act, it was considered like treason. He could have been executed on place. What he did, he took my mother's hand, she took my hand, I took my dead hand, and slowly, slowly, he took us from that gate of death against the current of the queue, through the other end of the queue, and left us, giving us another chance of life. Meanwhile, came an order from the central government, from Bucharest, to stop the massacre, and the women and children to be taken back, to be left, to go home. Men to stay there. And what was the fate of this man? I won't describe to you. It was worse than hell. They were sent to the railway station, into the death trains, if you heard about this. Worse than Auschwitz. This was a picture of me with a family a few months before that Sunday. When I turned 6, they decided to have a family picture, a present. And this was what happened in the streets of Iași. In that Sunday, people were rounded, hands up, sent to the police station, and there it was the end. This was the committee of Jewish community in Iași, after they were tortured in the police station building. You can see they didn't look so good. But this is the most horrific thing that we saw in the streets when we returned home. Because when we were herded by the German soldier, We couldn't concentrate of what was going on the streets. A young couple with a little girl, and in many places here. In any case, we didn't return home because we were still scared of anarchy. He may finish his job with us. We went to my grandmother's house and stayed there for a few months until we found a more modest accommodation to move. My father came back 2 days later, and he was one of the lucky people, maybe again a miracle, that wasn't sent into the death trains. They didn't have enough capacity. They took only 4,000 people in the death trains. 2,000 and more didn't return from that voyage. So this was the end of that Sunday. The intensity of events in this Sunday, compared with what happened in the next 2 years of Holocaust in Romania, made for me to consider that my Holocaust was a one-day Holocaust. But what a day. It left to me, for the rest of my life, an imprint. In that day, in that Sunday, that little boy of 6 matured. I matured in one day. I understood what is responsibility for others. To keep quiet, to obey the orders. I understood what means good and evil. Until then, good for me was the charming prince of the children's stories. And the German soldiers, they look like this, but they were evil. Good was that officer that saved our life with the risk of his. And he didn't look like charming prince, but he was the humanity. The rest of the Holocaust of 3 years, 2.5 years, went compared with that Sunday, uneventful. Yellow star, no spoon, never. So this is the story. But it had fallen out 70 years later and 80 years later. This made me consider that in certain terms, that story is unique. What happened 70 years later? It was 70 commemoration of the Holocaust in Iași. I was invited, I went. There were many talks, opinions, but I retained only two. They were actually the wisest of all. The first was from the Metropolitan of Moldova in Iași, equivalent with Archbishop of Iași. And he said words that I never heard in Romania. He called the Psalm 133, which says, how good and pleasant it's when brothers are living together in peace and harmony. I heard all this now in English, Hebrew, even songs of this, Latovo Nanayim, Achim Shevet Gam Yachad. But in Romanian, it was for the first time, and for me, had a different resonance. And the extension of King David's sword, which was meant for fighting Israeli tribes, to Romanians, Christian and Jewish, both Romanians, how good and pleasant, and he called all of us brothers and living in peace. The second one was from a very simple man who survived the death threats. And he said, I don't have any feelings of revenge to those who did what they did, but I want only one thing. What happened in that Sunday, not to be repeated. This is very good. Myself, I think that this is what I have to. But maybe even the first one, the quote of Psalm 133 should be on the frontispiece of United Nations General Assembly Hall, when the United Nations to be united in peace and harmony. We had, with the occasion of this 2011, with the occasion of this commemoration, a visit of the mass graves, which was not only in Iași, but in the whole area, from the streets to others. We see the magnitude of this graveyard. And it was a big ceremony with a guard of honor. You see the guard with the monument, with a military band, with a wreath of flowers. The one on the left is from the German embassy. You can see the flag. A few years later, I realized that I'm not alone. There were other children who were marched at gunpoint in the streets, when I saw a notorious picture of the child in the Warsaw Ghetto doing similar things, but without the help of his parents, in the streets of Warsaw. He was maybe a few years older than me, and nobody knows even now if he survived. But the picture was taken by a German photographer that I didn't have the honor to be photographed in the streets. And the second was a painting by a famous painter, Samuel Bach, of himself in Vilna, where he was also marched inside. So this was quite a practice, to march children at gunpoint. Probably some of them, they were even shot. Ten years later, I wrote an essay that David Sachs mentioned about my memories, entitled That Sunday. Well, when I visited Yash in that year, they invited the community, invited me to present my memories about, not about the pogrom, my memories from Yash. And I presented them that Sunday essay in front of a hall, mixed Jewish, Christian, but what was important, it was a class of students of high school who learned about Holocaust something, but it's a big difference between what you learn at school in historic books and from the presentation of a real witness. When people heard about this, they didn't know what happened actually on their own streets. And Yash is not a big city. It's really a provincial city. They were voices who asked the organizers to propose the mayor to award me the title of honorary citizen of the town. Not because I survived, because it was not an act of heroism from me. The real hero was that young Romanian officer who risked his life. They did it. The mayor took the council, the proposal to the council, and they voted in unanimity to award the title. I was very honored, but I was already back in Johannesburg when they said to come back to receive the title. It's not a trip from here to Pretoria. But I said that it's important to see my fellow citizens at that ceremony, to face them. I went back. Before them, ceremony. It was a television interview. Guess where the interview took place? In the very place of the massacre, the police station, which is now a museum of Holocaust. The interviewer asked me a question: are you prepared to forgive all of this? My answer was that I'm not entitled to forgive, because it happened even much worse to those who suffered from this event. And it's up to them to forgive. But they are not here anymore. But what I said, I don't keep any blame to the children of those who committed these atrocities. With one exception, that they shouldn't defend the acts of those who committed them. Anyway, the ceremony went on. And this is inside that National Theatre that I showed you in the beginning, with the mayor there, handing me the title. And that was here where I brought to the Holocaust Center the document and the medal. That was a gold medal. Now, I would like you just to imagine myself on this stage in front of a full hall of hundreds of people, listening to the boy who has marched in the streets at blank point. I looked at the audience, people, and came to me the wise words of the metropolitan of Iași. How good and pleasant it's when brothers are sitting together in peace and harmony. But also I say that I will never forget those who perished. And please allow me, for those who speak with me, Her Excellency, members of Father Tali, what came in my mind in those moments? It is a paraphrase of the great poet Enrico with his poem, The Star. And what I said was, pe noi cei care am viețuit duminica aceea adâncă, lumina celor ce-au pierit, ne urmărește încă. For us, who lived that Black Sunday, the light of those who perished is still haunting us. Thank you.